Hello and welcome back to, honestly, a fantastic live presentation of the Sumer Daily Podcast. We are absolutely given a gift from the higher power, Shawn Syed, an absolute crazy snow game. It was green in the beginning of the game. It was white by the end of the game. I don't even have the words to describe this game, frankly. Shawn, help me out here. I'm speechless.
Sam, I'm very happy that I got to watch the game in the warmth. I think we have to have an important discussion about these outdoor games. Look, it looks sick. I'm not here to object to that at all. Obviously, I played ball in New Jersey. We had snow games, rain games, and just general cold. Some of the shots by the TNF crew were fantastic, Sam. I'm talking we got the Oscar noms coming out in January, but the camera crew just fantastic jobs. You got the overhead of the stadium. It looks so beautiful. Once it starts impacting the game, though, that just kills me. We're changing offenses, we're getting in backup quarterbacks, and I guess though, when I look at it, I don't know how much of the game really would have been different if it was just in a beautiful day with no snow. It feels like it would have been, a whole big mess either way.
Yeah, and look, Shawn, we do haters and appreciators over here, and frankly, I was texting you in the lead up. I don't even know what I hate or I appreciate this time. It was just there was everything in this game, and sometimes we were hating, sometimes we were appreciating, and then it flip-flopped by the end of the game. Let's get into haters and appreciators because, as you said, I feel like this game was definitely affected by the snow, but my mantra as an old school football guy is that championships are won in the snow. This was football. This was the Steelers presented to us on a silver platter, telling us, hey, if this is a championship team, they're going to pull out this game. Then all of a sudden their offense catches fire. Russ is hitting, great passes in the middle of the field, splitting the two safeties. Calvin Austin scoring a touchdown. All of a sudden it looks like a Steelers championship, AFC North championship is in the cards, but not to be. So let's start off with our haters. Shawn, coming into this game, you did not love this Steelers offense. Maybe walk us through what you expected from the Steelers offense, what we saw, and what was good and bad about this game.
I think in ways this offense was probably better, than what you expect kind of coming in. I thought that Russell Wilson had some just sweet throws, right? I'm never here to fight that. You have a high average depth of target player. I think he had a 99th percentile completion percentage over expected. Of course, a lot of that is thanks to the receivers there, but he had those nice throws to Austin down the middle. One certainly to an inside quarters safety, and then one obviously for a touchdown later in the game. The offense, it's just, I don't know, it's just volatile in a way, right? You're running the ball into tough looks. I feel like Najee Harris maybe didn't have his best game, and then we'll go back and watch the film, look at the computer vision metrics, see how everything kind of looked at there. They've won 2 games this season without scoring a touchdown, right? I think they had 6 games without a first half touchdown. They've over 20 drives in a row before they scored a touchdown in this game. And it's rough sledding sometimes. I think that when they had some tough short yardage calls that, just brings up a lot of questions, I think, to them. And it's just, pulling teeth sometimes. And Sam, I guess I don't want to just be a full hater about it. I love that they're good at the football aspects of football. They're good at blocking, they're good at tackling, although they had some tackling struggles on the defensive side. In this game, just when I watch their offense on a week-to-week basis, you are hyper limited. You don't have easy buttons in different ways. You don't have different ways to, and it might be that you can't make your quarterback's life easier in that your quarterback wants to play a specific style. So at one level, I really appreciate that we're going to run the ball, we're going to throw deep shots, because that feels like a fun kind of offense, right? In a way, but I think when things kind of go down to it, it's just tough for them to, even in this game, they're able to get back from behind. I do really like that. Obviously, that's driven by the defense. But when you think about teams, with that many wins, it usually looks like an offense that's different than this.
Yeah, and certainly. And speaking about the snow, obviously, we're projecting the numbers onto the field now. We're projecting the line markers on the field. I think analytics have gone a little bit too far, Shawn. I want to have mystery when I'm in the snow of where we actually are on the field. And speaking of the analytics going too far, in terms of EPA per play, those drives at the end of the game really booned up the way that Russ looks at the end of this game. He really has a pretty good EPA per play. You noted that he had a 99th percentile CPOE, but we go look at the success rate, and it's really in the red there. They were below average in terms of success rate in that passing attack. So let's focus in on the good. Let's focus in on those 2 drives. Like those were, I thought they were backbreaking. I didn't think the Browns were going to come back from that. What changed from what we had seen in the beginning of the game to those 2 awesome drives that Russ was able to put together?
It just feels like when you're able to hit that shot through the middle of the field, that is so big. And the first drive that we're kind of talking about, the snow is really coming down. It feels like it's in his face, and you're able to scramble a little bit, make those throws. You're able to scramble outside, and even just get yards. So it feels like too much is reliant on, hey, can you hit this like kind of tough throw? But I thought on those drives, Wilson did just a good job. You're going to take your outside throw kind of early on. I thought there was, if I'm thinking about the right drives, there's the one where you kind of those 2 verticals outside, a cornerback kind of leans too far to the inside. You hit that throw out there. And you can take advantage of the defense in different ways. I guess when I think about the Steelers, I mean, you're still leading the division. You still have division games to play. Like you can still absolutely win the division. And I mean, behind this defense, you absolutely can. I guess you hope that you can take some of the positives from those drives where even this game, it ends up being just a really close one overall. But if you're able to expand your pass game a little bit, obviously I mentioned those short yardage calls because those are just tough. Like you can't gain a yard. You can't gain 2 yards on those situations where I'm happy they went for it on 4th down, right? I think when we think of Tomlin, right. I think, on the 4th down decision, he's usually not towards the top of it. So I guess maybe you get a little bit of confidence in your offense overall. If you can access that middle part of the field, even if it's all the way down there, you're going to have over like an 11-yard average depth of target anyway. Just, stressing the defense out in different ways. I think there's some positives to take away, particularly from like those 2 drives. I guess I'm just concerned how you stretch that out, to a full game and really to the rest of the season. And of course, like this is going to be a playoff team, Sam. Like I can't fight that in any sort of way. Right. This team is going to be playing late in the season. You just wonder, how many games can you rely on creating this many turnovers? And for them, it feels like, hey, they keep creating them. So why would we fight that?
Yeah. And I also got to give it up because on that big middle of the field throw, Russ took an absolute shot from Tomlinson, the big, tackle there for the Browns. And I don't know if it's sustainable. And what was really interesting to me is that Tomlin was starting to kind of shake it up and throw Justin Fields out there, in a running capacity. And when it really came down to it, it was Fields who was throwing the fade ball at the end of the game there to try to lock in, a drive. Obviously doesn't go their way. The Browns are able to drive it down the field, score a touchdown. And speaking of the Browns, man, I mean, the crowd was showing up. This was really kind of like one of the crazy external circumstances games that I've really seen because the Browns have been struggling. The Browns have had all this hoopla around them. They now have Jameis Winston as a quarterback. Jameis was making some inspired plays. All of a sudden, the crowd, who did not leave despite it beginning to literally blizzard in a way that, it was looking like a normal field. Shawn, we were monitoring the weather all week. When it was looking like it was going to rain, they noted that it was going to be a, quote, wintry mix. It ended up just being straight snow, to the fact that both coaches had, a quality inch of snow on the bills of their hat. Like it was getting out of control. All of that comes together. I noted, the old Disney film Angels in the Outfield. It felt like an Angels in the Outfield game for Jameis. And moreover, as we all kind of love, we love football over here. We love the good and the bad. We accept it all. And Jameis Winston perfectly encapsulates the good and the bad of what a quarterback can do. And frankly, we saw it all today, Shawn. So take us from the very beginning, what you saw in that pregame speech, all the way to the end, him making some big throws down the line and ultimately ending up in a scoring drive for them to win the game. What'd you see from Jameis today?
Sam, I just think about like, how do I explain the Jameis Winston experience to my nephews? Like when the youngest one grows up, like what do I tell them it was like to watch Jameis Winston? And the pregame interview, you even see the speech in the locker room, just an incredible energy, right? Like this man loves content. He is breeding content with every word that comes out of his mouth. I thought that he did a good job on the one drive kind of earlier on where you're targeting Jerry Jeudy a bunch. That's something that we talked about in our game preview. And I like that Cleveland was getting to a little bit heavier personnel because look, you have to find a way to block those 4 guys. And if you're bringing bigger bodies inside, like the Steelers have the advantage that they can just make you waste eligible receivers. That is a good thing for the defense because you can just have more zone defenders against fewer receivers. But you get heavy inside, you bring everyone in there, and then you're able to kind of isolate Jeudy on the outside. You get Jeudy on the crosser like that. I felt like was a positive situation. And then the snow, it slowly piles up, and Jameis, I feel like is just biding his time for that jumping touchdown. Now that is an angels in the outfield moment for sure, where we see the battery pack of his helmet speaker pop out. It's just a hilarious look. And then, I mean, we have a bunch of like a rollout later in the game on a potential game-winning drive where it ends up in a drop. You get the Njoku one where Queen kind of knocks it out of his hands, and then the next play it ends up being a sick catch. It's just wild. Like, I mean, he made a tackle in this game, Sam. We're talking quarterback tackles out here now. Of course, he had the interception where it felt like he was probably throwing to a spot where, maybe he wants his receiver in a little bit of a different spot. And just like up and down is not even a way to describe it, Sam. It's even the downs just like, or have me levitating. Like watching him just like sprint down on the tackle is like, man, this is seriously an experience. And as we think to next year about like, who are the just kind of bridge type quarterbacks that some of these teams are going to look to when you start looking about maybe who is in the draft. And if you don't feel as great, like, hey, maybe we don't take, a quarterback or like 3 quarterbacks going in the top 10 or something like that. The Jameis Winston experience, I hope that someone signs up for it again. And I hope that we get to keep talking about it.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because it feels like no matter who Jameis plays for, obviously there was a Jameis Saints experience. There was a Jameis Buccaneers experience. It feels like he's always able to pull out at least one of these games like this, where, he makes the mistake, but it's almost like he's like a good pitcher. You give up a home run. In his case, he throws a pick that seems like it's going to end the game for them. The defense comes out and makes a stop, and then all of a sudden he's right back in. I mean, you just look at some of the throws. You have what seemed to be a back-breaking drop from the tight end Akins in the middle of the field that could have probably, gotten you in a spot where you could have got a little bit more conservative, ran a little bit more clock off than what they ultimately did. Now, they did get it under a minute at the time that they really scored, but nonetheless, you could have really drained it all. But instead, you're facing, a long third down, a fourth down, and he's able to just make the play because he's an athletic guy and he has a good arm. And unfortunately, that leads to, moments like the pick where it just causes a major problem. And it ends in moments where all of a sudden he's sprinting down the field trying to make a tackle after a fumble. But it's just so interesting to me that he's kind of that old school style quarterback. You go back and you look at some of just the general counting stats of these 80s and 90s quarterbacks, and they look a lot like what Jameis Winston stat lines typically are. You're seeing a lot of throws, you're seeing a lot of yards, you're seeing just the box score filled up for better or worse. And, you look at the advanced stats for today, it was for worse. Like, I mean, he was a below average player in this game, below average EPA, around average ADOT, slightly above average CPOE. But at the end of the day, when you're a team like the Browns right now, who is really struggling, and you're able to throw him in, you're able to pick up a couple wins. I really would have been interested. I've been kind of harping on it all year. I would have been interested in where they would sit at this point if they would have started him all year. Obviously didn't come to pass. We'll see how that plays out for the rest of the year. But let's flip from the offensive side of the ball where, we love the Jameis experience. It's all over the place. But let's flip to someone who is almost always good, Shawn, and that is Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett came to play today, and then it seemed like he was going to go out with injury, and down the stretch, he's able to get a couple key pressures and really pin his ears back and shut the game down for the Browns, which, the whole reason they were in the game in the first place was because he was getting great pressure in the first half. Talk to me a little bit about Myles Garrett.
I mean, just an absolutely absurd individual player. You had 2 sacks where he's getting chipped, including that forced fumble earlier in the game where, like, you can't scheme anything better. I guess you hope that the chip is better. Maybe it's a chip, the tackle, and a running back. And, Sam, of course, there's times where I think some tackles prefer not to have a chip. They're actually, like some of the Chargers guys, they don't like having chips all the time because it can, it changes your tempo, changes your timing a little bit. It moves the angle. It just like changes like the pace of things overall that you're probably a little bit more used to. But you have to account for Myles Garrett all the time. Like, he really, really can just fully wreck things. I think that Schwartz does a good job, obviously, letting him rip, just like, go ahead, get the go see ball, get ball, but then also using him on stunts inside. Just, you have to find different ways to manipulate things a little bit. He just feels like a player so far in his own tier, in a game where obviously you have just so many good edge rushers. It just feels like, he's still a cut above everyone else.
Yeah. And his production on a year-to-year basis is what just gets me. Like looking all the way back, this was a guy who was a highly touted recruit. He goes to Texas A&M. He for most of his career was considered to be the number one pick in his draft class. And he had holes in his game. There were years that, LSU and Alabama would just run at him. There were years that it seemed as if he couldn't stand up. And then by the time he gets to the NFL, he's that complete player. And I think, again, like if we're talking about judging guys in the hardest of conditions, in terrible adversity, he goes down with an injury. He's in the blue tent. It's snowing. It's disgusting. I can attest how bad it hurts to get hit every single play as an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman in that cold environment is. And he is just able to push through and absolutely dominate a game. And I think that chalks it up. I mean, like, I don't want to say that a player can single-handedly win a game, especially given how complex football is, but Myles Garrett has that ability to really change the face of a game and change the face of how a defense approaches it. Now, you got to give it up to other guys. You got to give it up to the way that, Grant Delpit played. You got to give it up to the way Tomlinson on the inside played and some of the cornerbacks, obviously, as well. Like, it's a team effort, but Myles Garrett just makes such a big difference for a team. And it's an interesting dichotomy because, Cameron Hayward did have a good game. Patrick McQueen ends with 7 total tackles, but we didn't see a ton from TJ Watt. We saw 1 tackle for loss, 0 quarterback hits. And it's a real dichotomy there. I mean, like TJ Watt, obviously fantastic player. Maybe it's just an off game. There's a lot of, strategy going on. Kevin Stefanski obviously made it a priority that TJ Watt was not able to get into this game. But when Myles Garrett is able to dominate, it's just a fantastic thing to watch. And so, Shawn, when you're like comparing players like that, when you're looking at the hardcore film, you mentioned the chip. What are you looking for to see them get around to really differentiate between these tippy top tier players?
I think that, some defensive ends, or edge rushers in general, they just deal with the chip a little bit better, whether it's anticipating it, whether it's you're using that chip now to help set your move up against the tackle. Like, I mean, I've seen good examples of like edge rushers that they have a running back coming to help, and like they actually use that against the offensive tackle because they know that the tackle feels like they have help, but you can kind of split that in sort of different ways. I think that offenses, sometimes you have to have like a receiver in that spot actually, and not like, you don't want a smaller body doing that, but where the defensive end feels like, hey, like this receiver is just not going to do anything. And you can kind of find just a different way to chip a little bit, whether it's using motion or having that guy do that before getting into a route. But whenever you have an edge rusher that forces the offense to take a receiver out, like an eligible receiver out of the pattern, like that is crazy. Like that is such a positive thing. It helps you just on the back end in terms of math. And the Steelers are interesting because they're 4 down, right? They are during their pass rush situations, they'll play an odd front, certainly in base personnel, but like they're 4 down. They're just going to go rush and go after you. Really, like they're so happy to do that. And they don't move Watt around a ton. So you're going to know where he is. So you can know, exactly where to chip, kind of how to chip, why to chip, and when to chip. So that makes like maybe a little bit easier on the offensive line or the offense in general, where like, hey, I know exactly where this guy's going to be, where Jim Schwartz is going to move Myles Garrett around more often. And there's, pros and cons to it. I would favor just moving guys around just in terms of manipulating where's my matchup coming from. Like, can I just give the offense sort of a different look? But when you're as good as the Steelers defensive line, I guess it's hard to really argue, I think, with what they're doing. It's just, it's a different flavors. And I think overall just, it's just like so fun to watch Myles Garrett play. Like it seriously, Sam, sometimes when I'm watching the film and I'm like kind of scrolling through, I'm like, am I on like 1.5 speed or like what's going on here? Like, or sometimes literally like the camera, it feels like it's not picking up his movement. Like he's moving like in such a way that it's like, it looks like a glitch. And I'm like, well, what is going on here? Like, I know this camera is like a crazy high quality camera. Why is it that Myles Garrett is moving like a superhuman and giving us issues here?
Yeah. And ironically, that's the thing that stands out to you. And the thing that always stands out to me is his size, which like when you're pairing both of those across, I guess 4 sets of eyes, however you want to call it, it really shows that this guy's the difference. And it shows up in the box score today. You look at Russell Wilson, 4 sacks today, taken 22 yards. Jameis Winston protected pretty well, 1 sack. Maybe we can chalk that up to the game planners, but we also got to chalk that up to the dominance of Myles Garrett. So before we get into your favorite part of this upcoming week. I know we did a lot of previews. Everyone should go check out Stats and Scheme podcast. Came out today. I hopped on. We went through one stat and one scheme for every single game upcoming this weekend. But Shawn, I just want to know, because this was such an interesting game, and you mentioned it's kind of hard to watch the film on these snow games. But given that, as we kind of all know at this point, Pittsburgh is a playoff team. What is the thing when you are going to go to deeply break this down for the people to know that you're really going to be keeping an eye on for, maybe you want to see how Russ played in this weather and that may move forward? What is the thing that you think is going to be predictive from the film of this game?
Yeah, I do want to see if like some of those inside shots, is that something that they were setting up? Because, I was a little bit tough on Arthur Smith for some of his short yardage calls. I think that's certainly going to be something. I'm not sure how much time I'm going to be spending looking at like the Justin Fields package overall. I think it's smart to have something there. I'm just not sure, is that like a short yardage situation? Obviously, like you get a ton of snow. Unfortunately, that is affecting the game. I feel like the end zone view is going to be something like I keep on replaying, just like watching the offensive line versus the defensive line. It felt like watching live, like, hey, maybe the Steelers didn't have their best day tackling. Is that something like for a team that is usually so good at tackling? Is that something that, was it something the Browns did? Is it just like Nick Chubb is a sick player? And I'm so glad that we get to watch him kind of continue to play. So I feel like, kind of in the nitty gritty there, just feeling like, can Russ continue to do some of the positives there? Or like, early on, we saw there was a play where it looked like they were running a boot to Russ's left, and it seemed like the highest guy he ran free. And I just want to replay. Like, is that something that Russ missed? Is that something that we should expect him to make? Jameis made that throw later in the game, so you're just kind of doing your scorecard of like on balance. Is this enough? Because again, like you have all these wins at this point. Like it's not like you're not going to make the playoffs unless you have a really big collapse. It's just seeing those little things of, are you able to continue to expect this just fantastic defensive performance where I thought the Browns did maybe a little bit better job than some other teams in literally just like forcing missed tackles?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great breakdown there. And again, folks, go subscribe to the Stats and Scheme podcast where you can catch all of Shawn's deeper breakdowns in more long form. I will be joining him again next week until Tage gets back from vacation, and then you'll have your regularly scheduled programming with Tage and Shawn breaking down one stat and one scheme from each game, reviewing on Tuesday, previewing on Thursday. And speaking of previewing, Shawn, we did a whole podcast on Thursday, but for the people, for the live viewers, for the Sumer Daily broadcast folks, what are you excited about this weekend?
Sam, there is so much to be excited about. I keep on saying this, like, oh, there's no bad slates, there's only bad attitudes, right? When I'm looking at the slate, one, fantastic Thursday night game that just happened, like that's already in the past. For some of the games, I think Minnesota at Chicago, I really want to see how much is Brian Flores going to blitz Caleb Williams. Are the Bears overall as an offense going to just be able to like keep that time to throw down, keep that pressure rate a little bit lower? I think Detroit in Indianapolis, I want to see how much man coverage is Detroit going to play. Is Anthony Richardson going to be able to run through that? San Francisco, Green Bay. I mean, it feels like such a big narrative game where obviously LaFleur wants to get back at Shanahan. It feels like we have injury news around Brock Purdy. We're not even sure if he's going to play at this point. Right. It feels like San Francisco's season, not that it's hanging in the balance, but a really, really huge moment. And then the rest of the NFC West, right? The Cardinals are playing Seattle, where the Cardinals feel like, hey, they're leading the division. They can maybe turn this into something. And then, I mean, Sam, I feel like I want to talk about every game now. Eagles at Rams Sunday night. I think that's going to be something where we get to see the Eagles defense stressed in a little bit of a different way, where Sean McVay is going to have, a lot of good beaters for what Vic Fangio's defense has in terms of like some of the simple checks. Obviously, Fangio's going to have some new tricks. And then we get back together on Monday night, Sam. We're going to talk about the Harbaugh Bowl. We got the Ravens at the Chargers. I think that's going to be an exciting one in so many different ways, just seeing how good is this Chargers defense, right? There were times where Joe Burrow was able to just get creative. You're able to move around in the pocket and create some explosive plays. And then, how much is that Ravens defense going to hold them back? So I feel like there's a ton to look forward to. And maybe most important to look forward to, Sam, is us talking again on Monday night.
Oh, certainly. And you broke down some of those primo games in college. We have kind of a chaos circuit. If you're not looking for the best of the best, folks, like you're not looking towards some great coaching in the Harbaugh Bowl. You're not looking towards, two great teams playing in that Rams matchup. but you want to see the Big 12 chaos happen on Saturday, there's a lot to look forward there. I mean, just absolute chaos going on. Shador Sanders is going to be involved. There's going to be some Iowa State action with Rocco Beck. Just an awesome week of football. You know we love football, and we think it's great, Shawn Syed. So thank you for joining me. Any last words, my brother?
Sam, as you mentioned it, like, I mean, I love my job every day. I love getting to talk to you about football every single time. But this game was very much like, man, this is so sweet. Like, this is such a fun time being able to do this.
So a little alliteration. We got a little bit of snow, and we're going to sign off too. He's Shawn Syed. I'm Sam Bruchhaus, signing off from Sumer Sports. Thank you for catching up with us, folks.